All right. So, got an interesting conversation today. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Ben, it feels too loud. So, where does that come from? Right? So we got to get to the root of the problem. And that's what we're going to try to pursue today. You know, this one little child said, "Grandma, how old are you?" And Grandma said, "Oh, we don't talk about, how old we are." Grandma, how much do you weigh? Sweetie, we don't talk about how much we weigh. And so the next day she comes up, "Grandma, you are 67 years old and you weigh 170 pounds. How do you know this?" "I saw your driver's license. And I also saw that you failed sex." She got an F in sex, male, female, F, okay? It's no good if I have to explain the joke, all right? So, yeah, I think when it comes to sex, lots of people fail. It's just one of those things that it's a problem. And I was doing my research, and in our society, it is more sexualized. And I'm like, no. I'm a history reader. Sex has been a problem throughout history. Okay, I would say the Roman culture was way more sexualized than we are. However, in today's kid has access to porn right here, and they surveyed kids, and in a survey you have 2% plus or minus. 98% of the children said they had seen porn. And it's possible with a plus or minus 2%, that means everybody has. So this has been a disappointing tool for people's minds to get corrupted. And the mind gets corrupted, the soul gets corrupted, everything's bad. When I was in high school, we didn't have these, you had to get a magazine. And so I remember in a dream, I went up, guys had stuff in their drawers, right? And so in a dream, I went over to my friend's house and I pulled open the drawer to pull out a magazine, and there was a little snake in there. And so I'm like, oh, grabbed it, closed the drawer. Next thing, I'm right back at the drawer. I open up the drawer, and there's a considerably larger snake. You kind of had to, use a little finesse to pull it out. I'm back at the drawer. The third time, as I cracked it open, all of a sudden this monstrous snake came out and just overwhelmed me in the room, and that was the end of my dream. And that's kind of how it works with lust. The base starting point of adultery. At the University of Nebraska, they took a survey of incoming freshmen. How much did your church influence your views on sex? And sadly, the views were, no, our church doesn't talk about sex. Our church doesn't believe in sex. Okay, our church doesn't do sex. And kids, there was a complete and total breakdown of sexual information being passed on to our kids. That's why in the youth group, we have regularly scheduled conversations about sex. And I just want to let you know that the conversations are not about boy-girl today. It's about same-sex, it's about transgender sex, it's about all these different terminologies that kids are, they're just in this fluid, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other conversations. And I'm just blown away that when I was a youth leader, It was pretty straightforward. I did not have to deal with the kind of questions that today's youth leader gets and has to, deal with. And we live in a sexualized culture. Think about television. Constantly you see sexual images, okay? And so maybe there is some merit to the fact that we have a more sexualized conversation or culture, because the television, there's adultery is always constantly, somebody's getting in somebody else's bed, and it's just a normal thing that we accept and believe in and believe as part of society. We're brought to believe this is a normal behavior pattern, okay? And even in commercials, I never understood why ladies in bikinis were selling lawnmowers. Because I've seen people doing, mowing their lawns all my life, and I've never seen a lady in a bikini mowing the lawn. But when you buy the mower, that's the commercial. We live in a sexualized, culture. And God actually talks about this subject. This is a biggie to God. And maybe that's why nobody wants to listen, because the moment we say, "Thou shalt not," our sinful nature says, "Oh, yes, I will." Okay? That's just how the sinful nature operates. I remember one time I'm in Maui, on the other side of the island. Where's that bamboo forest? Anybody know where that is? Right outside of the bamboo forest, there's this sign that says, "No swimming, sharks, jagged rocks, and dangerous currents." It's right there on the sign. And you look out, people are in the water. You're like, really? And that's kind of what God does. He has this sign, "Hey guys, don't commit adultery." Because there's sharks, there's dangerous currents, there's jagged rocks. I'm trying to protect you. We feel like, well, God's trying to restrain my rights. No, God's trying to protect you from getting hurt. I got a bunch of statistics here about sex, and let me just say, there's a lot of it going all around in every possible dimension you can imagine, okay? Kids, adults, everybody's got this kind of sexual inclination. And really, sex is a taboo subject. We don't talk about it. It's the unforgivable sin in the church. For some reason, that one is the area where we say, okay, if you step over the line here, you're in the wrong ballpark. We have more grace for anti-Christians than we do fallen Christians, which is something that we maybe want to reconsider. And let's just think about the seventh commandment in terms of the culture that Moses brought it to. When you read what life used to be like in that world, what are we at? 1500 BC. Wow. Okay. That was a depraved sexual relationships. There's a place in Leviticus where God says, okay, and it seems like he goes through every possible scenario in Leviticus 18. Okay, don't have sex with your mother-in-law or your son's wife or he just goes down the list. Because guess what? That's what the culture was like. Every possible wrong way you could do it, it was the way it was done. And Baal worship. How did you worship Baal? You had sexual orgies. Okay? We have communion and baptisms. Those are our rituals. They had drunken orgies. It's a little more attractive for evangelism purposes. But see, this is what God does. He comes along and says, okay, I'm different than the sinful, broken world, and I want you to be different than the sinful, broken world. I thought it was fascinating that Caesar Augustus enacted an adultery law to curb people's addiction to sex because it was destroying the family foundation in Rome. He also did the same thing with murder. He said, okay, guys, you can't just decide to kill your slave because they broke a beautiful vase. Life has a little more meaning than that. Caesar Augustus, all right? This is a Roman emperor who's coming along and figuring out, okay, we got to change our morals. And then suddenly Christians show up. And Christians, they share their bread, but they don't share their wives. And this was different than the Roman culture. Back then, kind of like now, heterosexual activity was turned into sport. And they didn't shield their kids from it. And I've noticed seen less and less do we shield our kids from sexual visuals. Again, horrible tool that is in the hands of kids today. And so it's into this immoral sexual culture that the Lord comes along and says, okay, it has been said, don't commit adultery. I don't even want you to think about it. And this is what God does. He goes, all right, this is the law. Let's take the law deeper. I don't want you can say, I don't commit adultery as you have a huge fantasy life. You do commit adultery inside your head, which affects your soul, which damages your relationship with God. And that's why he says, okay, it's not just about behavior modification here. This is about the core of who you are. I don't want you to kill, but I also don't want you to just have rage inside your mind and imagine, slaughtering your enemies. No, we bring grace there. And in sexuality, we bring wholeness. Okay? The other sex is not for your lustful gratification. Okay? Sex is for a marriage. Okay? And you see this in the way God says, only your wife, only your husband. And in Rome, they noticed the Christian women's high level of commitment and dedication. What women these Christians have, because they were different than Roman women. In fact, one of the Greek physicians in the 2nd century noted Christians are advanced in self-discipline. Well, it's not that we were self-disciplined. We were following the Lord's mandates on how to do a husband-wife relationship. Okay? God's ways were so attractive that they became the dominant virtue and norm for society. Isn't that beautiful? Really is. Now, you and me, we were created to be sexual beings. Wow. This is God's idea. All right? That you would have sexual yearnings for your partner. And sadly, the sinful nature gets involved and messes up every aspect of our lives, including our sexuality. But your desire for a partner, notice this, when God makes the creation, he says it is not good for man to be alone, so he creates a companion to complement Adam. In other words, I'm not sufficient, me and my creation. The creation needs somebody else. We're supposed to have a community. God's a community. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The three of them dwell together. We needed to have a community. And so God gave us a personal community, husband, wife, the family unit, and then the church family, our social lives, and our civic world around us. So you can see the levels of community that God has instilled within our existence. And I want you to hear something kind of wild. When we engage in intimacy with our spouse, it's an expression of our soul's deeper yearnings. So when you come to this place, this is not, hey, it's Tuesday, I usually go to the gym, but, we're going to be together. No, this is a place where I'm going to bring my emotions, you're going to bring your emotions, and husband and wife become one. It's a really beautiful intention that God created. It's not physical sport. Sometimes that's all it is. But what it's really meant to be is two souls slow dancing together. How's that? That's kind of cool. Philip Yancey says, sex is the closest human expression to our union with God. It's not just a bodily urge. No. Okay? You're touching someone's soul. When I have the confirmation class, I say to the girls, don't let some guy that you barely know put his fingerprints all over your soul. Because it's a really precious place that you're supposed to keep ready for the guy that you love. And let me just tell you that no, it's just not today's society. You know, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a virgin in today's society. Oh, I'm sure there's, just the percentages. There's going to be some, but it's just not the norm. It's just sadly, society is conditioned that you need to have experience, and you miss out on that precious gift that you're supposed to be able to. It's a counterfeit. Okay? Adultery is a counterfeit to the real thing. And Jesus spoke about the religious leaders' flippant approach to divorce. They basically had legalized adultery. I don't like the eggs that you made for me. We're going to get a divorce, and I'm going to upgrade with a brand new spouse. And Jesus comes along and says, your version of divorce is adultery. And he calls them on it. And it's kind of a big deal because, well, what about those of us who've been divorced? You mean the 64% of America? Okay, yeah, lots of divorce. It happens in our world. Once you get divorced, are you not able to marry? I used to have a very spiritual, religious neighbor. Once you get a divorce, you cannot ever get married again. It's in the Bible. I said, okay. So let me just get this straight. So if I get in a bad place, or if I'm in a bad place, or the communication breaks down in my marriage, we separate, I'm forever defined by that low moment in my life? Or does grace, God's grace and forgiveness, bring about, at that moment when you got a divorce, that's filed under the sin of adultery? Okay? You committed adultery. You committed the sin. Now what happens to the sin? God forgives it. And He remembers it no more. And now you go forward asking Him to step into the relationship, asking Him to bless your future, asking Him to be part of the forward motion of your life. And, sadly, that one hit your life. It happened. Most people were not walking with the Lord when it happened. Sometimes Christians get divorced. Who knows what's going on? I don't know the baggage that the other spouse grew up and had to deal with, the therapy that they should have got, the wrong combination of personalities. I don't know what it was. But you know how it is. Divorce happens. Things go wrong. And God takes it there, and if the two of you say, Lord, we want you to step in and heal our relationship, boom, it happens. And if sometimes that person's not willing to go all the way and seek the healing, then it doesn't happen. All right? God's used to dealing with broken, sinful people. That's why Jesus says, it's because of the hardness of your heart. That's why Moses gave you the certificate of divorce. So when you bring a less hard heart, somebody just asked me, just before I came in here, is it okay for me as a Christian to tell this other Christian that you can do better? And you're like, well, obviously what you want to do is say, how about this surrendered Christian and that surrendered Christian come before the Lord and watch Him heal the marriage? But that's usually not what happens, is it? Usually there's somebody who's not surrendered to the Lord and not willing to put the other person first and not willing to deny themselves their rights or whatever it is. And that creates the problem that's unsolvable. Human nature, not God's will. But you stay close to God, and guess what happens? He figures out your future. Well, Genesis Joseph. Potiphar's wife comes on to the handsome young man, and he says, I can't sin against God and your husband. David, he gets busted for Bathsheba, the relationship with Bathsheba. He says, it's against you and you only I have sinned and done what is wrong in your sight. He's talking about God. Okay? Adultery is God's, hey guys, I don't want you to do this, and I don't want you to think about it. Jesus, whoever even, process it in your mind, you've committed adultery. And it's a little bit weird, but I want you to feel this. Adultery is primarily an offense against God, who wants faithfulness for us and faithfulness from us. So, all of us are in the process of surrendering more and more of ourselves. And when you get to a spot in life where you're surrendering the core of who you are, the piece that nobody else sees, okay? You're surrendering the inside of my soul to the Lord. And the more you give to Him, the more He redeems and the more He turns your mess into a message. And David's adultery, it had collateral damage. Okay? His life from that moment on had a lot of negative stuff happening in his family, with his son trying to take over the kingdom. Probably lost respect with his nation. But you'll notice something. When Absalom tried to take David's kingdom and the battle was underway, it says that the forest killed more of Absalom's soldiers than David's soldiers killed. In other words, God was fighting for David. What does that mean? That means when you fall, God's not done with you. But you do open up avenues of brokenness into your life that wouldn't have been there if you might not have gone in that way. So, adultery, it's counterfeit love. People say, we love each other. Yes, I know you have happy feelings. You have broken marriage dynamics over here, happy feelings over here. Which way are you going to go? I like happy feelings. Everybody likes happy feelings. Okay? Happy feelings are good. But you see, we're called to agape love, which is not happy feelings, it's sacrificial love, where I got to deny myself and step into the relationship that's difficult and say, how can we fix this? Let's go to counseling. What needs to take place? And it's possible you can do all that and say, you know what, we're not compatible, we got to go. But people don't go through the process of trying to heal a relationship. Okay? And we get all excited about the eros love and forget about the agape love, and people get hurt. Your spouse gets hurt. Your children get hurt. Friendships are broken. I got friends right now, they got a divorce, and, we used to hang out with the spouse, but we can't hang out with the spouse because, it's all different because he's hanging out with him and wife's hanging out with her, and we can't get together anymore. And, you just see this weird combination. And adultery does something else. It opens up an awkward area of compromise with your theology. Okay, hear me on this one. People readjust their theology. Well, I know God makes this statement. However, He didn't know what it was going to be like. Oh, He knows. He knows better than you. Okay? Time and time again, when people they try to justify spiritually why they're sinning rather than just going, you know what? I'm a mess. I'm in sin. Whew. And those people, I say to them, oh, you got to go to church. I can't go to church. Are you kidding me? I go, oh, yeah. This is the best place for you to be. Because right now, you need to be in a place where you're covered by God, where He can speak to you, where He can guide you. He's okay. He understands that you're broken and falling and struggling. For sure you want to come to church. He accepts you. You're safe there. So while you're in his presence is where you're probably going to get healed. You don't get fixed and then go into the presence of God. It's in the presence of God you get fixed and healed. And you know, people, they redefine what God says is offensive to him as okay. And God says, you know what, your body belongs to me. Your relationships belong to me. And we can't take God's unique property and engage in actions he says no to. Let's look at our civilization for a moment. This is a biggie. An eminent historian concluded after studying 88 civilizations that human society must choose either to display great energy or to enjoy sexual freedom. Great dynamic of let's build a powerful nation or let's enjoy ourselves. This is what he says. If we choose sexual license, we degrade people physically, emotionally, communally, and culturally. If we expend energy to produce a superlative community, you have a great nation like America. But what's America all about right now? And what's the root cause? Is sexuality not what all we're talking about? I was in 3 conversations yesterday about bathrooms. Guys in women's bathrooms. Guys in their daughters' bathrooms. I went out to dinner Sunday night and there was a guy in my wife's bathroom. Okay? And all of a sudden, you know, what do I do about that? You know, do you see the awkward situation that a man is put in when there's another man in your wife's bathroom, and if he's going to do wrong and I'm going to protect my wife and then I'm going to go to jail? This is the crazy dynamic that has been set up. By the way, all 88 civilizations denigrated into lust and lost their greatness. This is history. History. Well, you know, we don't want the religious right telling us what to do. We hear that. Well, it's not really the religious right. We're just telling you what God says is best for you, best for your marriage, best for your family, best for your nation. He's the creator. He knows things. Okay? And when people say, well, I want God to stay out of my bedroom. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure it's good to exclude him from any part of your life, especially your bedroom, right? It's so funny. People say, you know, I'm going to unpin this sin from the cross, my sexuality. I want the freedom to do whatever I want. Well, okay, you can unpin your sin there, but you still have a whole bunch of other issues where you need God to step into your life, your attitude, your relationships, the healing from the brokenness that caused you to be a sexual mess. And when I say caused you, you realize, friends, that probably 1 out of every 3 women has been mismanaged and hurt in life. That's a lot of people. Right? Well, what causes adultery? I think it's an outward expression of an inward brokenness. Right? You don't decide, oh, today I think I'm going to have a little adultery. It's not the way it works. Okay? No. It's a lonely person who is trying to fix the loneliness and doing it incorrectly. Yeah. You know what? I do marriage counseling, premarital counseling. And so I go, all right, you know, let's have our conversation. Tell me about how did you meet? Tell me about your family dynamics, because I can learn a lot about you from your family dynamics. And then I roll into, so let's talk about your communication habits. Because what normally happens is your new spouse, suddenly you don't like the way they're communicating with you. And if you don't fix that communication, then somebody withdraws. And a resentment starts to build up. And as the resentment builds up, more withdrawal takes place. And there's a negative dynamic between you because you're not talking things through. And then your spouse that you thought you liked when you got married and you're not sure you like anymore because you don't really have great communication, they're at work and there's a wonderful person that has this great conversation with them and says, "You look great today, and I loved what you said at work, and I really and all of a sudden you're interested. Wow, somebody's nice to me. Somebody likes me. Not like my spouse at home." And they accidentally step into adultery. Were they lustful fillies? No. The wrong, broken communication leads to this sin. And so it's not meeting the emotional needs of your partner. And that's why it's good to have lots of conversation. Okay? Because when you meet each other's emotional needs, the automatic connection is to seal it with intimacy. Okay? That's how it works. And by the way, what about those people who have fallen? Well, remember the woman caught in adultery thrown at Jesus' feet? The law says stone her. What do you say as they hold their rocks? And Jesus says, whoever's without sin, cast the first stone. Okay? So that would mean everybody put your stones down. Okay? And then Jesus says, where are those who condemn you? He goes, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. He doesn't condone it. Go and sin. And people try to make a big, what does he mean by go and sin no more? Can somebody go and sin no more? No. Wrong conclusion. But what does he talk? What just happened? Adultery. What almost happened? You got killed for adultery. What maybe you ought to adjust? No adultery. Okay? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. So, Jesus doesn't condone it, but he looks beyond our sexuality to reach into the broken soul. I don't know why she's committing adultery. As a regular counselor, I've been able to see patterns of why it might have happened. When we mismanage our pain, when we're not connecting with our spouse, when you're reacting against your spouse's, mannerisms. There's all kinds of different reasons. You were broken as a child, and you brought all that brokenness into a relationship, and you weren't emotionally healthy enough to be married. You could just go down the list of all different reasons why. But Jesus wants to heal the child that was broken when they were little. Heal the dynamics in a marriage that aren't working. Heal your self-esteem that causes you to think you're not worth anything. See, Jesus goes beyond. That's why he doesn't condemn. He's a healer, I did not come to condemn the world, but to save the world. Well, God gave us sex. It was his idea. We like to think that it was Satan's idea. No. His idea. And we need to think about it correctly. You know what C.S. Lewis said? Any healthy male could populate a small town given the chance. Okay? That's why God comes in and says, how about you populate your household? And in this relationship that I've given you, that I've anointed, that I've blessed, that you've made a covenant with me, this is where I want to see you thrive. Okay? Well, let's be honest. Everybody sitting here, you're a veteran at relationships. How many times do you fall in and out of love, and in and out of love, and out of love? And You got to work to get back into love. You know, relationships are work. And yeah, when you have divine assistance and God's presence and the Holy Spirit whispering into your ear, and you are willing to forgive so that you can go forward for the sake of the relationship. Wow. What a deep, powerful, amazing relationship you will have. And I don't know. There's multifacets to our sexual relationships. You know, for guys, you know, doing the vacuuming and the dishes. For some ladies will say, well, that was foreplay. Okay? You know, it's a little joke there, but, you know, wow, thank you. Okay? Yeah, learn each other's love language and speak it. That you got to be proficient in figuring out what turns your spouse on, what makes them happy, what matters to them, and meet that. And when both spouses are seeking to speak each other's love language, that's a marriage made in heaven. The problem is she'll meet mine and I won't bother to meet hers, and then there's a whole bunch of problems. And so each one invests completely in the relationship, and it's so beautiful. You know, our world today, that sex is merely an appetite. But, you know, do we write poetry and sing songs about food? No. We write poetry and sing songs about love. Because this is that inner drive. This is where we need healing. And not Marvin Gaye's sexual healing. You know, when I get that feeling, I need sexual healing. You know the context of that song? A friend of his comes over to his house, sees his immense pornography collection, and says, Marvin, you need sexual healing. And there comes a great song, you know. Kind of missed the point of the rebuke. But, hey, we live in a sexualized culture. Believe it or not, with the exception of the Victorian culture, it's probably always been highly sexual culture. So how do we keep ourselves from falling? Well, Martin Luther says it, you can't keep birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from making a nest. All right? And so how do we do that? One, take every thought captive. The moment a lustful thought comes, you go, nope, don't go there. Something that I figured out as a young man, when I would see a woman, I would go, daughter of the Lord, ministry opportunity. So that I didn't go, oh, you know, humma, you know, just boom. Saw that person as a daughter of God, saw that person as somebody I can bring Jesus to. And that really just changed the dynamic. And then another thing is you live for God, not for yourself. He provides for you. And if it's broken, you can go to your spouse and say, you know what, I feel like this part of our life is broken. I wonder if we can heal it. And get into that conversation and make it right. At the end of the day, it's all about, it starts with good emotions, it gets broken in bad emotions. And if you're somebody who has blown it, okay, guess what? God's a forgiver and a restorer and a redeemer. Although I will say this, adultery is different for senior folks. I found this out. An older woman told her husband, I'm having an affair. And he asked, will it be catered?
Well, was it?
It's their business. All right. How do we do on that complicated one?